Okay, so how to sell without being salesy. Now, you're both in sales, right? Everyone sells something. Now, how many of you like to be salesy?
Nope.
Nope. And how many people do you think like to be sold to?
Nobody.
Nobody.
Not too many, nope.
No. But the thing is that everybody is selling something all the time, whether you're selling a product, a service, your ideas, whether you are selling your kid on eating their dinner, you are selling something all the time.
Yes.
So this sales process that we're going to talk about today is from the NLP 5-step sales process. Now, I'm a trainer of NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis, as I think both of you know. NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, meaning your neurology, the human nervous system, your language, how you label your world, describe your experience, and how you communicate with others and with yourself. And then programming is how your language programs your neurology to create behavior and get results. So very simply put, NLP is the study of excellence. And we're going to apply that to sales today. Now, this process was created by Dr. Tad James, who is my trainer, and he created this process specifically to sell non-tangibles. So to sell items that people can't see or touch, like insurance, for example, is a non-tangible, which means it applies really well to tangible items. Now, the first thing, before we can talk about sales, we have to understand a few things. And one of them is our internal representations. An internal representation is NLP jargon. NLP is very jargonistic. This is NLP jargon for basically the pictures in your mind. So what you're holding in your mind as an idea or a concept. Now, this is really important for sales because what you might not have heard before is that 80% of people have already pictured themselves in their minds as using your product or your service. They've already pictured that, what it would be like to use it. And then your only job is to connect them to that internal representation. If you do that, you get a sale, and if you don't get a sale. This is your only job. So if you're not closing at least 80% of the time, then you're not connecting people to their internal representation. Now, those other 20% of people, they're window shoppers. They're people who show up at the mall and they just want to look at things and they have no idea what they're there for. They just want to look. For both of you, people are making appointments to meet with you, which means they're more likely in the 80% that have already had a picture of what it's like to use your product or your service. Now, the internal representation is made up of 6 things. We call it in NLP the VAKOG, which means your visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. Really simply put, that means the pictures, the sounds, the feelings, the tastes, and the smells that are in your mind. So it's an entire sensory experience of what it's like to use your product or your service. They're holding this in their mind. And the 6th one is, we call it auditory digital, which simply means the words that you use. That's the self-talk. That's the part of you that's talking to yourself. So this whole thing makes up an internal representation or a picture of what someone is holding in their mind of what it would be like to use your product or service. So they'll have an idea of what it would feel like to them, what they would see, what they would hear, what it would be like to use that. Now, for sales to be successful, there are 5 principles of success that we discuss in NLP, and these 5 things translate perfectly into the sales process. Now, the first one is, hang on, I just lost my remote, my mouse control for some reason. There we go. So you have to know your outcome is number 1. Knowing your outcome means you know what you want. Before any interaction with a client or a prospect, you have to know what it is that you want. Ideally, you want to sell them something. You want to connect them to your product or your service. You want to provide value. So know your outcome. Now, often when I'm coaching people specifically on their sales, I'll have them do an exercise where they, before every sales meeting, before every consultation, they write down exactly how it's going to go. And 9 times out of 10, they're right. So if they write down something like, this person is cheap, they're never going to buy anything, chances are that person's not going to buy anything. If, however, they write down the outcome that they want, the best case scenario, chances are they're more likely to get that. You get what you focus on. So you have to know your outcome. The second one is take action. You have to actually do something. To get a sale, you have to do something. You have to put yourself out there. You have to market yourself. You have to meet with people. You have to talk to them, or they can't buy your product or service. Part of taking action is being really clear on what it is you provide. You need to know what is the problem you solve so that people know what it is that they should hire you for. The third one is have a sensory acuity, which is NLP talk for you need to have an idea of what's going on with the other person. Sensory acuity is how do you know if your message is getting through? Can you read that on the person? Do you have a sense of if they like what you're saying or if they don't like what you're saying? Are you on the right track or do you need to pivot and change direction with them? That sensory acuity. Also having an awareness of how close am I to my goal? How close am I to my desired outcome, or do I need to change in order to meet that desired outcome? And then you need to have behavioral flexibility. So that means you can adapt your behavior to respond to whatever the other person is doing. So if you're using sensory acuity, which is to read the other person, and you get a sense that you're going the wrong way, you're not offering them and what they want, having the behavioral flexibility to then adjust and change your behavior to be able to communicate with them in a way that gets across, in a way that gets through to them every time. Oh, sorry guys, for some reason screen keeps freezing. So the fifth one, I'll just talk about the fifth one, is operating from a physiology of excellence. Operating from a physiology of excellence, which means that you are completely congruent in what you're offering, that you feel really solid in your presentation, what it is that you're communicating, and what your product or your service is, and that you're totally okay with that. And you can probably hear Rufus barking in the background. Let's try this. Can you guys still see my screen if I do this?
Yeah, it's good.
Yes. It's good there? Okay. I might have to do it this way because it's freezing the other way. Okay. So that's operating from a physiology and a psychology of excellence. And these are principles for success, and they apply to anything in life, whether you're in sales, no matter what you're doing, you can apply these 5 principles for success. Of course, in NLP practitioner training, we go a lot deeper into all of these principles, but this is to give you an overview of what that means. Now let's look at the 5-step sales process. Here's the big picture. The big picture view is you establish rapport, ask questions, find a need, link the need or value to the product or the service, and then close. It's a very simple structure, this process, and we're going to look at it at a deeper level. Now, both of you said that you don't like to be salesy. I don't think anyone does. But how would you like to serve your client? Right? I think both of you would agree that you'd like to serve your client. The word sell comes from the Norwegian selge, which means to service. So if you want to service your client, this is the best way to do it. Okay, let's look at rapport. You've probably heard of rapport before. You've probably done some work with rapport, I'm guessing. A lot of people, when they teach rapport, they teach it as you ask questions to find a similarity, a common interest, and then you build rapport based on that. I'm going to show you some ways that you can build rapport on a deeper level that is very covert. The basis of rapport is that people who are like each other, they tend to like each other. And you've probably heard it before that people who like each other tend to buy from each other too. We have to know, like, and trust someone in order to buy. So people who are like each other tend to like each other. The theory of communication, your communication is 7% words, 30% your tonality, that's how you say it, and 55% physiology. So that means that your words aren't as important as we tend to think. 93% of all of your communication is happening outside of awareness. So we can use that 93% to gain rapport with someone very easily. Rapport is a process of matching and mirroring. So it means that you're matching and mirroring the person's physiology and you're doing what they do. So for example, if I raise my left hand, and if you both raise your left hand, we would be matching. We're doing exactly the same thing. If I raise my left hand and you raise your right hand to mirror me, then we're mirroring. And that's a process of matching or mirroring. And when we're matching and mirroring, we're looking at different qualities. So first, we want to look at posture. So the first thing you do when you meet with a person for the first time, or any time you meet with them really, quickly assess using what we teach as sensory acuity. You're quickly going to assess what their posture looks like and then match that as quickly as possible. So if you're mirroring their posture, you're doing the near opposite. You should look like you're in a mirror. And if you're matching, you're doing the same thing. So with the same side of the body. And you're looking at their gestures, proximity, so how close they are. And handshake is a really good way to gain rapport. So for gestures, let's talk about gestures. If a person is very expressive and they're talking with their hands and they're doing a lot of this, you wouldn't want to do that at the same time that they're doing it, because that would be pretty obvious. And the goal with rapport is to establish it very unconsciously. You want to do it unconsciously. So if they're gesturing like this, while they're talking, you're not going to do that. When it's your turn to talk, you'll use your own gestures that are natural to you and just make them bigger to match the size of their gestures. Proximity, sit again with the same closeness as them. Handshake, use your awareness to notice, how do they shake hands? Is it a firm grip? Is it soft? What are they doing? How do they shake your hand? And very quickly match them on that. Do the exact same thing they do. Facial expressions, watch their blinking. You can match and mirror people on the rate of their blinking. So you watch how they're blinking, and by matching that rhythm, you can establish rapport. Smiles, when they're smiling, smile, match their kind of smile. Breathing is the deepest way to establish rapport. And with breathing, you want to watch the pace of their breath and the location. So some people, you'll notice that when they're breathing, you'll see their shoulders rise and fall. They're breathing up here. Some people will be more mid-chest. You'll notice their rib cage expanding. And some people breathe more from their stomach. You'll notice their stomach extending and retracting. Match them on those things. Breathing with someone will establish the deepest level of rapport, and it's completely out of consciousness, meaning they're not aware that you're doing it. In the ancient Hawaiian Huna tradition, if two chiefs from different islands, if they had a conflict, they would go visit the other chief that they had the conflict with. They would simply sit on the beach and breathe together for hours sometimes, and the conflict would go away. Just breathing. They would never say a word. They would just breathe. Breathing with someone is a powerful way to establish rapport. Never underestimate the power of breathing. Vocal quality, voice quality. So you want to match them on tone, tempo, timbre, and volume. So tone, the tone of their voice. Tempo, how quickly they're speaking. Timbre, that's the quality. So do they have like a gruff, raspy voice? What is the quality of the voice? And volume, how loud or soft they're speaking. Now, if you're both women, if you're speaking to a man with a very low voice, you wouldn't talk to him down here in a sort of mocking manly voice, the way women tend to do when they're mocking men. You wouldn't do that. You would talk in the lower register of your own natural voice. You would just drop it to what's comfortable for you, and that sounds natural. Same thing for any men who are watching the replay. If you're a male and you're matching a female on voice quality, if she's speaking at a higher register, you won't talk up here like Minnie Mouse. You'll just match in the upper register of your voice. Predicates. Predicates are the words that someone's using. When you start matching their predicates, you're now speaking their language. So they're going to use words that might indicate pictures, sounds, feelings, auditory digital, which is their self-talk, how they talk to themselves. So picture words would be words like, they might say something like, I can't see it. Or, yes, that's really clear to me. Something along those lines. For sounds, they might say, yeah, that rings a bell. I think I've heard that before. Feelings. I don't know. I don't really have a feeling for this yet. Auditory digital, they'll say something that sounds a little more analytical, like that makes sense, or I need to think it through. Those are auditory digital words. So you listen for their words and you start to match them on that. That alone not only establishes rapport, but you're speaking their language. It helps your message to get through really quickly and easily. In the practitioner training, we also teach eye patterns, and also in the longer sales training that I do, we teach how to read eye patterns. So you can gauge all of that by watching a person's eyes and what they're doing with their eyes. So a person might look in a certain direction, and you would know that because their eyes moved that way, they're making a picture. And then you match them with predicates and say, do you see what I'm saying? Now you're speaking their language. And then keywords. So you want to listen to anything that's really interesting that the person says, something that's maybe out of the norm or a little bit unusual. Make a note of it and use that back if it's appropriate. So Tad James has a great example of this. He was selling business consulting, and the man he was talking to kept saying to him, any consulting relationship we enter into must be valid in and of itself. And he said that 2 or 3 times in the conversation. So Tad made note of that. And when it came time to close, he just said, well, first of all, any consulting relationship we enter into must be valid in and of itself. And the man said, yes, exactly, and hired him. All he did was read his words back. So anything that's interesting that they say that might sound a little different or unique to that person, write it down and you can utilize that later. So these are all the things that you're going to match and mirror on. And this is how you know you're in rapport. So the first thing that you'll get is an internal feeling. You've probably had this experience before where you're talking to somebody, maybe you've never met them before, but you have this feeling like you've known them your whole life, and it's so easy to talk to them. That's the internal feeling. It's a feeling of connection with another person. It feels good to be in rapport. So you'll have that feeling. You'll notice a color shift in the other person. You'll see them go from maybe lighter skin tone to their skin will darken, and that's blood rising to the surface of the skin, meaning that they're now comfortable with you. They have left their stress zone and they're now comfortable. They feel relaxed. So blood flow is now free to return to the skin. The third one is they'll say something. This is optional. They don't always do this, but they might say something like, wow, Ashley, you're so easy to talk to. Or I feel like I've known you forever. That's a really good indication you're in rapport. And the fourth one is leading. So when you're in rapport with someone, if you move, if you change your physiology, they will move as well. That's another great indication of rapport. And you can utilize that as well. So we talked about matching people on their voice qualities. If you're talking to someone and say they're a very, very fast talker and they're talking too fast and you would like them to slow down, you match them first on the speed of their voice, the tempo, and then you start to slow your voice down once you've established rapport, and you'll notice that they'll slow down too. This is also useful if, for example, if someone's sitting in an uncomfortable way and you're in rapport and you don't want to sit that way any longer, you shift your posture, they will shift as well to something that's more comfortable. Or if someone's doing something that's really annoying or irritating. For example, in my Toastmasters club, there's a man that I sit next to quite often, and he has a habit of doing this. Would that drive you guys crazy? Because it drives me crazy. So I just match him. I don't do the same thing because that would be even more annoying. But I might tap with my finger, not making noise, but just to the same rhythm as the clicking of the pen. I'll tap on the table. And once we're in rapport, I'll slow down my tapping. And then I stop. And I put my hands just comfortably on the table. And I'll listen to him slow down on his clicking. And then he'll eventually put his hand on the table. So it's another very covert way that you can get rid of any distracting behaviors when you're having a conversation with someone or when you're interacting with someone. So that's rapport. That's how you establish rapport. Those are the things you want to match on. You can, of course, ask questions like, where did you go to school? And you can establish rapport through that. It is overdone though. You've probably had the experience where you've gone into a store or you've gone to buy a car or something, and the salesperson is asking you, where did you grow up? What city are you from? And they start asking you a bunch of personal questions. And if you've had this experience before, then you kind of tune into that and know what they're doing. That's a little too obvious. It does work though. You can utilize it. I would use that with caution. So just to review rapport, you're matching and mirroring posture, facial expressions, breathing, the voice quality, predicates, and keywords. With voice quality, that means you can also do this over the phone. And with predicates as well. You don't need to do this in person. So once you've established rapport, and you want to do that as quickly as possible, you begin asking questions. So here are some questions you might want to ask. So for what purpose are you looking for blank? That would be your product or service. What specifically do you want in a blank? What will you see, hear, feel when you have it? So all you're trying to do is you're establishing what is their internal representation of using your product or your service. How will you know when you have the right one? What will getting the right one, the right thing, get for you or allow you to do? And where are you now in regards to having this? So you might not say these exactly like this. This is what we use in NLP, but you can take these questions and structure them towards something that's comfortable for you and natural for you. So you're just trying to find out what is that internal representation, and then can you fulfill it? The purpose of asking questions is to uncover that internal representation and then to find the need or the opportunity. So not everyone, they might not need what it is you're offering. There may be an opportunity to improve their life or improve on something they're already using. So for example, Ashley with oils, if they're already using something, but maybe it's not the right one for them, or maybe it's not the best quality, there's an opportunity to improve on it. And then you find the need. So the purpose of asking questions is to establish the need. And once you have that need, you'll be able to fill it. You have to know what it is they need before you can fill it. And remember, 80% of people have already bought the item in their mind, which makes closing very easy. Now, here's the most important question that you could possibly ask. And if you only ask one question, one really specific, clear question, this is the one you want to ask. And that is, what is most important to you about blank, your product or your service? You word it exactly like that. What is most important to you about? So for example, in my work, I would say, what is most important to you about coaching? And the next things that come out of their mouth, you write down word for word exactly what they say in your notes. Don't paraphrase it, don't change it, just write down exactly what they say. These are their values. This is telling you what they value about what it is you do. Later, when you go to close, you are going to fulfill that need. You're going to use their values back to them. People cannot deny their own values. When you use their values, they can't deny them. So if they say, well, Ashley, I want to use your business again with doTERRA. So if you're saying, what is most important to you about essential oils, or what is most important to you about your health, you might say it that way. And they say something like longevity, having lots of energy, and staying healthy into my older years. They might say something like that. You write down exactly what they say, and then later you read those back to them word for word in the same order they delivered. And you say, so a moment ago you had said that ABC was really important to you, and you're linking value. You want to wait at least 5 minutes though before you read them back. Otherwise it's too much in their awareness and they'll catch on. So wait at least 5 minutes before using their values. It's important there to say it exactly the way they said it. Otherwise they're no longer their values. So you've established a need or an opportunity. Oh, and by the way, if there is no need or opportunity to make their life better or improve on what they're already doing, if there's no need or opportunity, then don't sell to them. That's when sales gets salesy and gross, is it gets pushy, right? If someone doesn't need what it is that you're doing and they don't see an opportunity in it, and you get to this point in the process, this is where a salesperson is going to start pushing. It's best just to let them go. They're not your person. Move on to the next person. So you're linking the need to the value. Link the need or the value to the product. The product will solve the problem. So you've established through asking questions, what is the problem they're coming to you with? And now you're going to show them that the product solves the problem. Use strategies if you elicited them. In the NLP practitioner training, we discuss how to elicit someone's strategies. I'll show you a little bit of that today, of how to do that. Everyone has strategies for everything they're doing in life. One of them is a decision to buy strategy. So there's a way that you can elicit that strategy. When you understand their strategy, you can sell to them using their strategy. And then you're repeating the client's values. So that's what they just gave you when you asked the most important question. You repeat their values and their keywords, anything that they've said that's interesting. Strategies. So a strategy is the order and sequence of the internal and external representations that consistently produce a specific result, meaning they do it this way every single time and get the same result. And the way you elicit someone's strategy is you say, have you ever purchased something you really like? How did you know it was the right one for you? And then you listen to the words they say. In the sales training or in the practitioner training, we also teach you how to read their eye patterns at this moment, because they might not remember or they may not be able to describe to you how they knew it was the right one, but their eye patterns will tell you. At this point, though, just asking the question should give you some information to use. So for example, if you say, have you ever purchased something you really like? How do you know it was the right one for you? And they'll tell you how they bought that thing. You want to make sure it's something they really like, not something they dislike, because that's a different strategy. They'll have a strategy for how to buy something they don't like. They have a strategy for buying something for someone else. They have a strategy for when someone buys them a gift if they know they like it. So you want to make sure it's something that they purchased for themselves and that they really like. Another way to do this very conversationally is ask them about something that they're wearing. I really like your watch. Did you buy that for yourself? How did you know that was the right one for you? How did you choose that? Or you can ask them about their career. You can say, you're a teacher. How did you know that that was the right career for you? How did you decide that was the thing you wanted to do? And listen to their words. So they're going to use some words that will describe visual, auditory, so pictures, sounds, feelings, or auditory digital, which is the criteria. So they might say something like this. Well, I went to the store, I saw it, I tried it on, and it was the right price for me. So then you know their strategy is visual, they saw it, they tried it on is kinesthetic or feeling, and then it was the right price would be auditory digital, that's the criteria. So when you're delivering your offer, you're going to say, look at this product. If they had a kinesthetic in there, you would hand it to them and say, here, look at this, and let them touch it. If they have a kinesthetic in any part of their strategy, they have to touch the product. Or if you're selling something that's a non-tangible, you put the offer in their hands, the piece of paper, let them touch something. And then you say, and then you would bring their attention to the price and say, this is a great price today, using the strategy that I gave you. So you want to find out, how do they make their decision? What has to happen? Do they have to see something, feel something, hear something? What happens? And you can do that very conversationally by simply asking them about something that they're wearing or asking if they've purchased something they really like before. And you can do that very casually. Or you can just tell them directly what you're doing and say, I want to help you make the best decision for you. So can you tell me about something you've bought before that you really, really liked? And then they'll tell you. And that's doing that. Sometimes people say, well, is that okay to do? Is that an integrity? And of course it is, because it doesn't guarantee a yes or a no. If you can't fulfill the strategy, if it's not the right thing for them, they're going to say no. You're giving them an opportunity to make a decision. The decision-making strategy is just that. It helps them arrive at a yes or a no answer. Doesn't guarantee a yes. And from a sales perspective, it's a lot easier when you get those yes or no's than a maybe. You never want to get a maybe. And then you close. Now, if you've done your job up until this point, if you've been able to elicit their decision-making strategy, their values, if you have a sense of their internal representation about your product or your service, then the sale's done. You shouldn't have to do anything to close other than accept their money. And these are some closing techniques. There are more. There are books and books on closing. But as I said, if you do your job up until this point, it should be very simple to close a sale because in their minds, it's already done. So the first one you can use is asking for the order and you assume the sale. So you would just say, how would you like to pay for this today? Would you like this on credit card? Do you want payment plans? Are you paying all up front? Something like that. You assume it's done. The order blank close is you have the agreement filled out and you hand it to them to sign. You can do an alternative choice question. So that would be, would you like it in red or black? You give them two options. Both of those assume that they're buying today. And then you handle any objections. The closing portion should be very quick. If you've done every other step up to this point, it'll be very fast. Let's talk about handling objections. The first option is to ignore them and go to step 3, which is to reestablish value. Or you can handle the objections and then go to step 3, reestablish value. Now, for the first objection they give you, you can just ignore that one. The first objection is never really an objection. So the first one, you can just reestablish value. So they might say something like, I can't afford it today. And you'd say, well, a moment ago you'd said, and you read back their values to them. You'd said that this, and this is really important to you. Is that still true? That's reestablishing the value. The second one you have to address. The second one is always a real objection. Now there are only 4 objections. So remember, the first one you can ignore and just reestablish value. The second one you have to address. There's only 4. The first one is I don't have enough time. So you could say something like, great, I'm going to show you how you can have more time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money. Then you can say something like, so are you saying that it's just money? Is that the only reason you're not buying today? And then you have options. You can, if there's a payment plan, you can offer them. If there's another option where you can do a drop close and drop down a level, offer them something else, you can do that there. Or you could say something along the lines of, well, I can show you how you can earn more money doing this as a business. Would that be of value to you? The third one, it won't work for me. That means they don't believe that it'll work for them. It'll work for other people. It just won't work for them. That's where you want to have client testimonials on hand that they can read, or a video they can watch of someone's success story. You want to have something you can show them of how this worked for somebody else. Ideally, someone who's similar to them. So if they say it won't work for me, and if you have like a bank of testimonials, have one for sort of the main objections that you get and the main scenarios you deal with. Have one for each one, and then hopefully you have one you can pull out and go, well, I had this client who said the exact same thing. She was worried this wouldn't work for her, and this is what happened. These were her results. You can also have clients or customers on hand, your best clients and customers who are willing to get on the phone and talk to people. So I have a few of those who will, anytime I have permission to give out their phone number, and they're happy to talk to anyone who just wants to talk to another person about their results. And the fourth one is, I don't believe you. Now, this is the hardest one to overcome because this means that there's something incongruent in you. And this goes back to the 5 principles of success. This means that there's something that's not fully in alignment inside of you, and they're not believing you. That means you have personal work to do on yourself for them to believe you. So an example of that would be going to a cardiologist who you see outside smoking a cigarette. You might not believe them because there's incongruency. Or if you go to a hairstylist who looks like they haven't washed their hair in weeks, that would be an incongruency. So that just means you have some work to do on yourself, that you're probably not going to get this sale, but there's work to do, and then you'll get the next one. When you're handling objections, listen fully to their objection, especially the second one, and you can act a little surprised. You'd say, oh, I get it. You mean that's the only reason you're not buying. If I could show or tell or feel, if I could show you how you could afford to buy it, would you? The last step is to answer the objection as above and go right back to establishing the value. So you go back to their values again. Now, if someone says, I need to think about it, that's not a no, and that's not necessarily an objection. For that, you would just say, you could ask them more questions, what they need to think about. If you've done everything up to this point, you shouldn't have that as a response. If they have to speak to a spouse, a lot of people make their decisions with their spouse. If they say, I need to talk to my partner about this, let them do that. I think the worst thing a salesperson can do at that point is try to push them into a sale and not have them speak to their spouse or their partner. That's asking them to go against their relationship values, which is not going to create a great client relationship. And that's a little salesy, and I think it's gross personally. I know for myself, I don't make large purchasing decisions without talking to my husband about it. Not that I need permission, but it's a courtesy. It's important for me that he's involved in the process and that I get his agreement. So if someone says they need to talk to their partner, let them do that. You can offer them some suggestions for how to have that conversation. You can offer to meet with their partner as well, if that's an option, to meet with all three of them and the three of you discuss it. Or I usually just say, if your partner has any questions, I'm happy to get on a phone call with them and talk to them about any of their concerns. And then let them do that. Let them have their time to speak to their partner and follow up with them later. So, any questions?